We've all heard it, or maybe even said it ourselves. They were perfect. Everything about them was amazing. So why did it still end? That kind of heartbreak stings the most, doesn't it? Because it leaves us not only grieving what we lost, but also questioning our own judgment. But here's the uncomfortable truth: perfection, especially in the early stages of love, is rarely about who the other person actually is. It's about who we believe they are. When we meet someone who excites us, who shows us affection, presence, charisma, we start filling in the blanks. We create a version of them in our minds, layered with our own ideals and unmet needs. That version is built less on facts and more on projection. We see their attentiveness and label them emotionally intelligent. We see their ambition and assume they'll be loyal. We notice a few shared values and tell ourselves this must be rare, this must be a it. In essence, we fall in love with the story we've written about them, not necessarily the person standing in front of us. And the mind is a master storyteller. It's wired to complete incomplete narratives. The moment we feel seen or validated by someone, we're tempted to fill in the rest sheet. If they're this kind, they must be generous too. If they make me laugh, they'll surely make a great partner. But people aren't puzzles that come with missing pieces. We just wish they were, because it feels safer that way. So when reality starts showing up in the form of inconsistencies, incompatibilities, or subtle red flags, we ignore them. We say, that's not who they really are. We keep choosing the version of them we've invented long after the real person has stopped showing up for us. This is why so many seemingly perfect relationships unravel, not because one person turned out to be awful or malicious, but because they simply couldn't live up to the ideal we crafted for them. And when the pedestal we put them on begins to crack, we're left holding two conflicting truths. They were everything I wanted, and they weren't right for me. Both can be true. Perfection in relationships is often a beautiful illusion, a combination of chemistry, timing, and wishful thinking. And illusions can be intoxicating, but they're not sustainable. The real work of love begins when we put aside the fantasy and choose to see someone fully, not as perfect, but as real. Because only when you love someone as they are, not as you hoped they'd be, can something lasting actually grow. The hardest endings aren't the ones where someone did us wrong. They're the ones where no one was to blame, but the truth still called time. There's a reason why so many relationships that start with an intense, almost cinematic spark still end in confusion. That chemistry, that irresistible pull, the butterflies, the late night conversations that stretch until sunrise, can feel like a sign from the universe. We think it feels this good, it must be right. But here's the thing: chemistry can be incredibly misleading. It's emotional fireworks. Yes, fireworks don't light the room forever. They burst, they dazzle, and then they vanish. Chemistry is often the first thing that hooks us. It's magnetic, sometimes overwhelming. We crave their touch, their voice, their presence. We mistake that craving for destiny. But what we often overlook in that moment is compatibility, the slow, steady foundation that actually holds a relationship together. Compatibility is in the quieter moments. It's in how you resolve conflict, how you handle money, how you divide emotional labor, how you support each other when life stops being exciting and starts being real. And here's the truth: you can have insane chemistry with someone who is completely wrong for you long term. We're drawn to people who activate something deep inside us. Sometimes that activation is healthy, and sometimes it's familiar chaos. Maybe they remind you of someone you've loved before. Maybe they tap into your wounds, your insecurities, your desire to be chosen. The chemistry feels thrilling, but it's not a guarantee of a healthy future. It might just be your nervous system chasing what feels familiar, not what's actually good. Compatibility, on the other hand, rarely announces itself in the beginning. It's quieter. It shows up in the day to day. Can we disagree without wounding each other? Do we want the same things in 5 years? Do our values align when life gets messy? Are we both emotionally mature enough to sit in discomfort instead of running from it? These aren't the questions we tend to ask when we're swept off our feet, but they're the ones that decide the fate of the relationship. Sometimes we stay in the wrong relationship because we're addicted to the feeling. We think, if I feel this much, surely it means something deeper. But feelings are powerful and at times deceiving. A strong pull towards someone doesn't mean they're meant for you. It just means something inside you recognizes them. That recognition could be a sign of growth or a mirror reflecting unresolved pain. It's on us to decipher which. The most painful breakups are often with people we had the strongest chemistry with. But in the aftermath, if we're honest, we realize that despite all the fire, we were constantly misunderstanding each other, constantly needing to explain ourselves, constantly compromising parts of who we are just to keep the peace. Chemistry got us in the door, but compatibility couldn't keep us inside. And that's when we learn that love isn't just about how someone makes us feel. It's also about how they make us live. Sometimes everything lines up, your values, your chemistry, your dreams, and yet it still falls apart. And when it does, the question that haunts you isn't what went wrong, but why now? Because timing, as subtle and intangible as it is, plays a bigger role in love than we often want to admit. You can meet the right person at the wrong time, and the story never fully unfolds. Not because the love wasn't real, but because life was pulling each of you in different directions you couldn't ignore. We don't talk about timing enough because it feels like a cop-out, like a convenient excuse. But in reality, timing is everything. Love isn't just about emotional connection. It's about readiness. It's about whether both people are in a place where they can show up fully, consistently, and with integrity. You might be ready to build something lasting while the other person is still healing from something they haven't processed. Or they might be deeply invested in a career pursuit, a personal transformation, or even just learning who they are without being in a relationship. When people are out of sync in their timing, it's not about blame. It's about capacity. Someone can care deeply for you and still not be capable of giving you what you need. They might not have the emotional availability, maturity, or focus to be a real partner in that moment. And trying to force a relationship when one or both people aren't ready creates a quiet, etching friction. On the driver's seat, one person will always feel like they're waiting. The other will feel like they're being asked to give something they don't have yet. What makes this dynamic even harder is that love doesn't always obey logic. You can deeply love someone and still need to walk away. You can want to build a future and still realize the timing is misaligned. It doesn't make the connection less valid. It just means that connection alone isn't enough. Sometimes people grow at different speeds. One person is evolving, confronting hard truths, taking ownership of their life, while the other is stuck in old patterns or running from discomfort. And the relationship becomes a tug of war between progress and preservation. It's not they didn't love you. It's that the version of themselves you needed didn't exist yet. And maybe they'll get there one day. But love asks a brutal question. Do you wait for someone to grow, or do you let go and grow without them? It's a bitter truth, but a freeing one. The right person at the wrong time is still the wrong relationship. Because love isn't just about who someone is. It's about while they're ready to be that person with you. So often relationships don't end because of some big betrayal or dramatic fallout. They end slowly, quietly, like a gradual fading of color. And when you trace it back, you realize it wasn't about what was said, but what was never said. Needs that remained unspoken eventually became needs that were unmet, and unmet needs breed disconnection. You start feeling invisible in the places you most want to be seen, not because your partner doesn't care, but because they were never given a clear invitation into that part of your inner world. We tell ourselves that love should just get it. That if someone truly loves us, they'll instinctively know what we need. But that belief sets up for disappointment. No matter how attuned or emotionally intelligent someone is, they are not a mind reader. Expectations without communication turn into silent contracts. And when those contracts are inevitably broken, when we don't get the response we were hoping for, resentment creeps in. There's a kind of pride that sometimes keeps us from voicing what we truly need. Maybe we fear sounding needy, or we've been conditioned to think that asking equals weakness. So we swallow the discomfort. We say we're fine when we're not. We hope our partner notices the change in our tone or picks up on our body language. And when they don't, we feel hurt, not just by the absence of action, but by the belief that they didn't care enough to notice. But how can someone meet a need they didn't know existed? Ironically, the longer we avoid voicing what matters, the harder it becomes to say it. The silence builds walls. The relationship becomes less of a partnership and more of a guessing game. The things that once felt easy, touch, presence, openness, now feel like negotiations. And eventually, one or both people stop trying altogether. Not because the love disappeared, but because the emotional ground between them was never fully cultivated. And here's what makes it especially painful. You can love someone deeply and still feel profoundly alone with them. That kind of loneliness hits hardest because it exists in proximity to someone who's supposed to make you feel safe. But connection without communication is just proximity. It's not intimacy. Being brave enough to speak your needs is not a threat to love. It's a way to preserve it. The right person won't shame you for needing reassurance, clarity, affection, or space. And if they can't meet your needs, at least you'll know that the relationship ended on the truth, not a performance. In the end, a relationship doesn't collapse because someone asked for too much. It breaks down when both people stop asking, when silence replaces vulnerability. Because love can survive conflict, but it cannot survive invisibility. There's a particular kind of H that comes from staying in a relationship long after you've already started to let go inside. You feel it in the way conversations become shorter, in the forced smiles, in the weight behind every moment of silence. And yet you hold on, not because it's still working, but because it once did. Because at one point, everything felt so good, so full of promise. That memory becomes the lifeline, and we keep reaching for it, even as reality quietly drifts further away. What keeps people in that space between knowing and acting isn't ignorance. It's fear. Fear of hurting someone who doesn't see it coming. Fear of being the one who ends a seemingly perfect thing. Fear of admitting to ourselves that we've changed or they have, and that what once made sense no longer does. There's a weight to ending something beautiful we feel almost ungrateful, as if walking away is a betrayal of the love that was real. But sometimes the most dangerous thing in a relationship is the idea that it should work. You're both kind, respectful, supportive. Maybe everyone around you admires your bond. Maybe even you admire it. But underneath the surface, there's a quiet erosion happening, one that isn't loud or explosive, but still very real. You stop sharing as much. You avoid hard conversations. You compromise in ways that make you smaller instead of stronger. And all the while, a voice inside you whispers, something isn't right. We don't want to hear that voice. We'd rather romanticize the past than accept the present. So we delay, we rationalize, we remind ourselves of how good it used to be. And in doing so, we trade peace for performance. We smile when we don't feel like it. We touch out of habit, not desire. We hope that maybe if we just hold on a little longer, the spark will return on its own. But it rarely does, because by the time we're questioning whether to stay, the fracture has already begun. What makes it so hard to walk away is not just the love we feel, it's the guilt. We don't want to be the one who ends it. We want it to end itself naturally, or for the other person to wake up and say what we're too afraid to. But that avoidance isn't kindness. It's self-preservation disguised as loyalty. And the longer we stay out of fear, the more we rob both people of the chance to find something that truly aligns. The truth is, love deserves honesty, not endurance. Staying in something beautiful that no longer feels alive isn't noble. It's just postponing the inevitable. Ending something good isn't a failure. Sometimes it's the bravest way to honor what it was and free yourself for what could be. Love, for all its intensity, can't survive on emotion alone. It needs evolution, both individual and shared. When one person in a relationship begins to grow, to challenge their beliefs, to heal old wounds, or pursue something deeper, and the other stays fixed in place, love starts to feel lopsided. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, often invisible at first. But over time, what used to feel like closeness starts to feel like distance. You stop speaking the same emotional language. You're no longer moving together. You're orbiting different worlds. We often imagine love as a moment, something we fall into, something we find. But the truth is, love is a processor. It's not just about choosing someone once. It's about choosing them over and over as they change and as you change. And that's where the trouble begins. Because not everyone wants to evolve. Some people fall in love with how things are and resist anything that threatens that version of reality. A growth feels like a risk to the comfort they've come to rely on. But comfort isn't the same as connection. A relationship that avoids growth in the name of peace eventually becomes stagnant. You stop challenging each other. You avoid the difficult conversations. You prioritize maintaining the image of harmony rather than confronting what's real. And slowly, the relationship starts to feel more like a memory than a living thing. When one person begins to explore, to stretch beyond old limits, whether that's emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, they begin to see the relationship differently. They want more depth, more honesty, more alignment. And if their partner isn't willing to grow with them, it creates an emotional split. Not out of malice or lack of love, but because their paths are no longer parallel. This is where many relationships quietly die. Not because anyone stopped loving, but because one person stopped growing with the love. And love without growth begins to suffocate. You start to shrink your thoughts, soften your truth, dull your light to avoid unsettling the balance. But the version of you that is evolving will always long for expansion. You can't unsee what you've discovered. You can't unfeel the call to become more. The most painful realization is knowing you're outgrowing someone you still care about. But evolution demands that you honor truth over attachment. Staying in a relationship that no longer reflects who you are doesn't just dishonor you, it dishonors the potential of what love can be. Love that endures is not the love that resists change. It's the love that makes room for it. Growth doesn't always mean growing apart. But if it does, that's not a failure. That's life asking you to stop holding on to what was so you can move toward what's meant to be.